So I wanted to go over this conflict between Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump. They've been having a war of words together in regards to what's been going on with the LA protest, and Donald Trump sending out the National Guard, basically federalizing the National Guard, sending them out without the request, because normally in a situation where the National Guard gets deployed, in most circumstances, it would essentially be a situation where hey, we need assistance. Can you send assistance to us? So in this case, maybe the California governor, Gavin Newsom, would be requesting it, or maybe the mayor of Los Angeles would be requesting additional support. And, in those cases, it's a request, so the National Guard would be sent in. But that's not what happened here. We have protests that started out, contrary to what a lot of people on social media will have you believe, protests that started out so peacefully that the LAPD didn't even feel the need to be there. I've been watching a lot of these streams from the very start of these protests, and at the very beginning, it was a peaceful protest outside of the immigration office in Los Angeles. And again, it was so peaceful that LAPD didn't even feel the need to send officers out there. It was fine. There was nothing wrong going on. And then federal agents showed up and started attacking the crowd, and that escalated and snowballed the situation into what we see here. But again, even with that, Gavin Newsom and the mayor still didn't feel the need to request, additional assistance from the National Guard, and Trump sent them anyway. And they were like, no, 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 we don't need that. That's only going to escalate the crowds further, agitates the crowds further. Don't do that. And he sent them anyway. And guess what? That's exactly what it did. It caused a lot of fear in the crowd, which further escalated the situation. And it didn't need to happen. At this point, it's just manufactured chaos that didn't need to happen. So obviously, there's a lot of words being shared between Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump, and so I kind of wanted to go over that. So let's take a look at what we got going on here.
A weekend of escalating tension in Los Angeles. Thousands of protesters upset of the Trump administration's immigration raids, clashing with police along side streets and freeways.
Now, I will say this, because obviously there is footage out there of agitators in the crowd engaging in, violent or malicious behavior. I like to be honest with you guys and upfront about with this stuff. Are there agitators in the crowd? Anytime you get, thousands of people in one place, we're talking tens of thousands of people are at this protest right here. When you get that many people, there's obviously going to be bad actors in the crowd, whether those bad actors are, part of the protests, or they're just people that are there just to cause chaos and trouble. At the time of, me covering this, there was a lot of looting that was going on last night. Obviously, those people aren't protesters. They're just people there to take advantage of a situation for their own benefit. But I will say this, that local law enforcement and local government officials have both said that the amount of people who are engaging in violent or malicious behavior or unlawful behavior are extremely minimal compared to the rest of the crowd. The large majority, and this is according to them, not me, the large majority of protesters have been peaceful protesters in this situation. In fact, the small amount of agitators in the crowd has been so small that, again, let me remind you, we have tens of thousands of people participating in this protest. And the small amount of agitators in the crowd is so minuscule that it's in the double digits, okay, in terms of people who've been arrested for engaging in violent or malicious behavior. That's how little the amount of violent acts or malicious behavior is going on in these protests, contrary to what a lot of right-wingers will have you believe on social media. But anyway, let's continue on.
President Trump deployed 2,000 National Guardsmen going around California Governor Gavin Newsom, who says he didn't need the help.
Local law enforcement had no needs. They were not requesting any additional resources, but they didn't need that support.
The funny thing is, what's fucked up about this situation is they've got me in agreement with Gavin Newsom. I'm not the biggest fan of Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, he's someone who he has no problem pandering to elements of the far right. If you don't know what I'm talking about, he has his own podcast, and on his podcast, he's had far right individuals as guests on his podcast, and he's kind of pandered to them on said podcast. At one point, he was even in agreement with one of his guests on, taking rights away from trans people for example. It's like, this is like the governor of a progressive state, okay? And this guy's like pandering to right-wingers on his own podcast. He's like Trump where he wants applause. I don't know if I would go that far. My problem is that the fact that he's willing to pander to like really malicious actors and do so in a way where he seems to be in agreement with some of their positions, that's an issue for me. But my point is that I'm not the biggest fan of Gavin Newsom, but like, this situation's so fucked up, and he's in the right in this situation. They got me agreeing with Gavin Newsom, which is really fucked up. Fuck you, Trump. How dare you make me agree with Gavin Newsom?
This is a manufactured crisis.
Newsom today announcing the state is suing the administration, alleging it illegally.
Roger, he just wants attention. I think a lot of what he's doing now, including in regards to the situation, I think it's his push to try and get the nomination for the next election. I think he wants to make a bid for president, and I think that this is his way of trying to get those nominations. You know what I mean? Get that nomination.
Deployed the troops.
There it is! Look at how useful the National Guard is! They're just standing around, doing a whole lot of nothing. Thanks, Trump. And I mentioned this during the last segment. I was listening to a report today that reported that, you know, they sent out initially 2,000 troops of the National Guard at the start, which all it did was piss off the crowd even more. But they sent out 2,000 troops of the National Guard. They're just standing around, guarding like a couple of federal buildings in Los Angeles. For whatever reason, they decided they needed to send 2,000 more, which are also standing around. They didn't prepare to send these troops out, to the point that they're sleeping on floors because they didn't provide adequate bedding to them and stuff like that, and adequate resources. But they're just standing around. And then on top of that, apparently, like, they mobilized 700 Marines into the area as well. And this has cost taxpayers $132 million. A very high quality use of those funds, right, chat? Having a bunch of National Guardsmen and Marines just standing around?
Not since the Civil Rights Movement in 1965 has a president bypassed a sitting governor's call for using the National Guard. President Lyndon B. Johnson called National Guardsmen in then to protect civil rights protesters in Alabama as they prepare.
Okay, I have to say this. I think that it's really funny that the last known instance we have of a president sending in the National Guard as opposed to the requests of a sitting governor was to protect protesters in 1965, but now it's being done to attack protesters and to antagonize protesters. Isn't that fucking wild? Holy shit.
To march from Selma to Montgomery when Governor George Wallace opposed the march.
These forces should be adequate to assure the rights of American citizens pursuant to a federal court order to walk peaceably and safely without injury or loss of life from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama.
Trump insisting the LA protests had gotten out of control when he made the...
What a timeline we are living in. Yeah, it seems like as a society, as a result of Donald Trump and a lot of his like orbiters and his supporters, it seems like we've like gone backwards in terms of the progress we've made as a society. You know, when you're looking at things like LGBTQ rights being taken away, you're looking at open acts of bigotry and racism and, you know, homophobia and like all these things. It really does seem like the Overton window has shifted so far to the right that we've gone backwards. It's sad to see, honestly.
Paul adding active duty Marines could be deployed and 500 are on standby.
I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order.
Where's the danger? This is live footage of the protests right now. Where's the danger? It's just a bunch of people marching together, a bunch of people standing around, engaging in their American right to protest an injustice that they see occurring in their country. They're watching undocumented immigrants being treated poorly, and they're speaking out against it. When I say that, what I'm talking about is, we've got situations where people are being deported who are legal citizens of the country. They're legally here and they're being deported anyway. We've got situations where ICE is being sent to elementary schools to do welfare checks on children, and thank God the schools didn't allow them in. Who knows what actually would have happened? There was a report that I seen earlier today where ICE raided a child's birthday party and falsely accused it of being a gang hangout. We have situations where they're using the courts to deport people. What I mean by that is, so many of the people who are being deported, these are people who are in the process of going through the legal process of obtaining citizenship. I think a lot of the people who speak out against like these, undocumented immigrants, these illegal immigrants as they refer to them as, I think a lot of these people don't understand that it's not as simple as like, you fill out an application and you pay a fee and then boom, you're like a legal citizen. This is a process that could take several years. Some people reported that it's taken well over a decade for them to obtain legal citizenship. And so what ICE has done in some cases is they will have the court in the area of like a particular individual that they're trying to deport. They will have the court call them out and say, hey, we have this, court appearance that you need to show up for like a regular check-in. And because these people, contrary to what right-wingers will tell you, actually want to play by the rules, they show up. So they can comply with the legal requirements that they need to be here until they obtain, legal citizenship. And then they show up and the courts tell them, oh, your hearing got dismissed, so you're free to go. And then ICE is waiting for them outside of the courthouse. And they deport them. Like, this is how fucked up things are. We have people talking about family members getting deported and they have no idea where they are. Where's our family member? Are they still in the country being detained somewhere? Have they been deported to their home country? Have they been deported to a country like El Salvador where they're not even from? Because that's happened too. People getting deported to countries that they don't even originate from. Like, this is the level of insanity that's going on here. Whether you agree with undocumented immigrants being here or not, they have rights. And they have the right to due process just like everyone else. And they're not being granted that with ICE. That's the issue here. They're literally the Gestapo. It's so true. Like, I know a lot of times, leftists will be hyperbolic with a lot of their language, but I 100% agree with that chatter right there. This is like the modern day version in the United States of the Gestapo. It's really that fucking insane. But anyway, let's continue.
The tension around the administration's immigration policies comes as Trump's new travel ban goes into effect today. The ban applies to travel to the U.S. from 12 countries, predominantly in Africa.
Oh, that reminds me. So the travel ban, that actually reminded me of another insane incident that took place. There was a woman that was visiting the States. I believe she was a tourist, visiting here. And she had all the documents she needed to legally be here as part of her vacation, her tourism here, and she got detained by ICE and deported. Like, what the fuck is going on? So even people who are legally allowed to be here are getting detained and deported. It's fucking wild.
And the Middle East. Christiane Cordero, ABC News, Washington.
Okay, so there's that video. I want to take a look at this video in connection to the situation as well. An unmistakable step toward authoritarianism. Newsom reacts to Trump's push for his arrest. Because that's another thing. Donald Trump has said that Gavin Newsom should be arrested. And Gavin Newsom's like, fucking do it. Oh my God.
A fourth day of rallies and protests on the streets of Los Angeles. The situation calm at this hour.
At the time of this stream, we're up to day 5 now of the protests.
A weekend that saw repeated clashes between protesters and police. Multiple cars were burned, dozens were arrested. The LAPD says that some officers were targeted with a Molotov cocktail and others were rammed by a motorbike. As we watch protesters face off against police, another tense standoff.
Yeah, and in response to that, obviously, I like to be honest and upfront with my audience about stuff like this, and I know that I've said this quite a few times during this stream, but honesty is honesty. Are there agitators in the crowd? yes, there are some people engaging in violent and malicious behavior that they shouldn't be, stuff that I wouldn't condone or encourage anyone in my audience to engage in, obviously. But again, according to reports from local law enforcement and local government officials within the mayor's office in Los Angeles, it's a very small number of people who are engaging in violent acts. The large majority of the crowds are engaging in peaceful protest.
Between President Trump and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Over the weekend, Newsom dared Trump border czar Tom Homan to arrest him after Homan suggested that California's Democratic leaders could face federal charges.
See, this is a rare-based moment for Newsom. Again, I don't like this guy. I can't fucking stand this guy. But, like, based? Rare-based Newsom moment?
If they interfere
You want to threaten to arrest me? Fucking do it then, dog.
Immigration raids. And now, President Trump making it clear just how he thinks Homan should respond.
Gavin Newsom he's daring Tom Homan.
So this clip's a little bit hard to hear, so I do apologize for that. It's just, you know, there's a lot of noise in this clip, but basically, like, what he says is that he thinks Homan should, you know, arrest Newsom.
Become an arrestor. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing.
Oh my God.
I think it would be a great thing.
That sounds a hell of a lot like a dictatorship. That sounds a hell of a lot like authoritarianism. Like, literally, like, anyone who is a dissenter of his, just lock them up. Absolutely, just lock up. I don't understand how people can't, like, people will seriously with a straight face say that, you know, oh, Donald Trump's not a fascist. Like, yeah, he is. Donald Trump's not an authority. Yeah, he is. I mean, this guy has openly admitted to admiring dictators like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. And he very clearly wants to be treated like them. What is it, this Saturday? He's holding, like, a military and tank-drawn, like, parade to celebrate his own birthday? Like, that invokes imagery of so many dictators in the past. Fascist dictators in the past. And, like, you know what I mean? Like, you've seen so many of these videos throughout history of, like, these fascist dictators who will, like, have these parades that are, like, it's their military, you know, it's meant to flex their military might. You've seen it with, like, Russia, with Vladimir Putin. They'll have their tanks in the streets. They'll have their soldiers in the streets. They'll have, like, their missiles, like, being paraded around in the streets and stuff like that. And it's meant to, like, flex their, like, you know, military dicks, you know, because they got small penis energy, so they have to flex their military dicks or whatever. Like, it's the same sort. We've seen, as crazy as this sounds, but I'm pretty comfortable saying it, we've seen footage of Hitler doing this back in Nazi Germany. And, like, Donald Trump's going to do this for his birthday this fucking Saturday? Like, what the fuck? But yeah, this guy wants to be a dictator on so many levels.
Governor Newsom very quickly responded to those comments.
That doesn't sound like, you know, democracy to me. That doesn't sound like a nation where freedom of speech exists. That sounds like censorship.
President. He wrote this, quote, "This is a day I hoped I would never see in America. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. This is a line we cannot cross as a nation. This is an unmistakable step toward authoritarianism."
Dude, like, Newsom is so right. Like, I've been watching his social media, and he pulls no punches here. He's absolutely right here. Unbelievable. I guess a broken clock is right twice a day, but whatever.
This afternoon, California announced that they're suing the federal government after President Trump authorized the deployment of those thousands of National Guard troops to the streets of LA without the governor's consent. The Trump administration claiming the troops are necessary and contradicting state officials who say...
How are the troops necessary? We've talked about this throughout the course of this stream multiple times, that the National Guard and the Marines that have been sent out, they're not doing anything. They're standing around doing a whole lot of nothing. They're not even out there doing, like, crowd management. A lot of the crowd management that's happening right now is happening from the LAPD and local jurisdiction law enforcement that's coming on board to, like, assist them. But, like, National Guard's not out there doing anything. The Marines that were sent out there, they're not out there doing anything. They're literally just there for no fucking reason. It's political posturing. It's Donald Trump pandering to his, brain dead supporter base. These brainwashed people who are in a cult and don't even realize it. These MAGA idiots. It's literally just posturing towards them. Look how tough I am. That's what this is.
That they have the resources they need.
What you're seeing is we're behind the
team coverage. Our panel is going to weigh in just a few moments. We're going to start with CNN's Kristen Holmes outside the White House, CNN's Jason Carroll in L.A., and CNN's Natasha Bertrand, who's standing by at the Pentagon.
Well, speaking of Jason Carroll, I have a topic that I want to cover in relation to them a little bit later, but we'll get to that when we get there.
With some new reporting. Jason, I do want to get to you first because this was the official appointed hour for the beginning of some of these protests for today. What are you seeing and hearing on the ground right now?
Well, the protests have gotten underway. We're right here, if I can set the scene for you, at Grand Park. It's just in the shadow of City Hall in downtown Los Angeles.
Trump has done some good things. Egg prices are down. Stocks went up under his watch. Oh dear. You are so brainwashed, my guy. You poor thing.
There are several hundred people here, or even more than that, Casey, who have gathered here, all in part to pay tribute to David Huerta, the president of the SEIU, the Services Employee International Union. This is a man who was taken into custody just a few blocks from where we are now.
That's true. They detained a union leader? Like, what the fuck was the point of that? What activity did they engage in that justified them being detained? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
District on Friday. The union says, Casey, that he was out here trying to protect the rights of migrants who were being taken into custody during an ICE raid. Of course, the federal government saying that this is not what happened. They're saying that what Huerta did was obstruct their efforts to take into custody people who are here illegally. And so what we've seen is a number of people here who are gathering. They're saying by taking him into custody, that is making a tense situation even worse. And of course, law enforcement...
That's what's going on here, is so many of the actions that the federal government are engaging in here in this situation, they're just making the situation worse. They're just agitating the crowd further. This is the reason why, this went from probably being a protest that was just going to be a day, and it's snowballed into this thing where it's 5 days later and we're still at it because they continue to agitate the protesters to the point that they feel the need to keep fighting for what they believe in. They feel the need to keep protesting on this issue because clearly the federal government and Trump is not listening to them.
Not want to see a repeat of what they saw.
And let's be real, it's Donald Trump. He has no interest in listening to these people.
Again, you had some dozen people who were arrested after protesters clashed with police, shut down part of the 101 freeway at one point. They were throwing cement blocks at police, setting off fireworks in their direction.
Hear that again? The right wants you to believe that there's just so much violence and chaos that's going on in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, this guy is telling you that the people that have been arrested because they were engaging in violent behavior is in the dozens. Okay? We're talking about, double digits of people. But local law enforcement and the mayor's office has openly reported that the number of people engaging in violent and unlawful acts is extremely minimal compared to the larger majority, the tens of thousands of people engaging in this protest and are doing so peacefully. Donald Trump wants you to believe that Los Angeles is under siege. They're burning down buildings, they're destroying infrastructure, and it's just fucking utter chaos here. That's what Donald Trump wants you to believe, but that's not what's happening. Yes, there are agitators in the crowd. Yes, there are people engaging in unlawful behavior that I personally don't condone, and I wouldn't encourage people in my audience to engage in. If you want to go out there and you want to engage in the peaceful protests, I highly encourage you to do so. Let your voice be heard. But like this notion that like there's so much violence and unrest going on in Los Angeles that the city is under siege and it's like under attack, that's just not true.
So they don't want to see a repeat of that. And those who I talked to out here today, Casey, say they don't want to see that either. They're hoping their message of peace does not get lost.
That's not so shocking, but draining thing is even if there was one bad apple, Republicans will hop on it and talk about that one. Well, see, this is what somebody mentioned the term in the chat earlier, and I forget what it is. But basically, that's what I was talking about earlier in the stream when I was talking about like some people who are agitators in the crowd. They will pose as protesters to try and make the protesters look bad, when in reality, they're like fucking right-wing chuds who are just there to cause chaos in an attempt to like, you know, push the narrative that the protesters are being violent. If anybody knows what that term is in the chat, I don't remember. There was a chatter who mentioned it before. But yeah, that's a thing that happens. I know that sounds like tinfoil hat conspiracy shit, but it's been like a proven thing that happens. Yes, opposing protesters, counter protesters, or people on the opposite side of the aisle in regards to the issue that's being, you know, protested against, they will show up posing as protesters to try and, you know, make the protesters look bad. Agent Provocateur, thank you, Erica. I appreciate that. But yeah, that is a thing that absolutely does happen. And I'm sure that there's probably many instances of that taking place during these protests as well.
Through all of the violence.
The city is doing a No Kings protest this week. I love that. Yeah, if you guys don't know that there's like a nationwide organization of protesting that's going on this Saturday. I mentioned, you know, the whole Donald Trump wanting to be a dictator and having like a tank drawn parade done in Washington D.C. in honor of his birthday. They're holding a organized nationwide protest called like No Kings or something like that. What is it? Let me see if I can find it real quick. So if you want to participate in that, that's a thing. No Kings protests. There's actually a website you can go to for more details about it. Is this it? Yeah, this is the website here. Let me bring it up where you guys can see it. NoKings.org. In America, we don't do kings. They defied our courts, deported Americans, disappeared people off the streets, attacked our civil rights, and slashed our services. The corruption has gone too far. No thrones, no crowns, no kings. June 14th, we rise up, and you can get more information about how to participate in these protests in your local jurisdiction. From there, I'll go ahead and I'll post that in the chat for you guys if you want to take a look at that. Here we go. Oh, did it go away? I think it did. 1 second, chat. My chat's being kind of weird. There we go. Okay, so you can take a look at that if you're interested in taking a look at that. I'll probably be streaming that day. So there you go. But anyway, let's continue.
Sure. All right, Kristen, let me go to you. I want to talk to you about what we've heard from the president.
Thank you for pinning that
today
mystical.
And what we expect to hear next.
Oh.
Comes to the rhetoric, it seems like a lot of personal attacks. At one point, he said that Governor Newsom was a nice guy, but he was totally incompetent. Then he pushed back on Newsom's claims that Trump wanted a civil war, saying it was Newsom that wanted a civil war, that if he wanted a civil war, he wouldn't have deployed the National Guard. And then after those comments about arrest,
the funniest thing was there was like some press release or some press statement that was done, something along those lines. And like one of the reporters like pushed Donald Trump because again, like Donald Trump is saying that like Gavin Newsom should be arrested or whatever. So one of the reporters pushed him and said, "Hey, what has he done that's, you know, illegal that, you know, justifies arresting him?" And he said some dumb shit about, "Oh, he ran for governor because he's doing such a bad job." And I'm like, that's not a crime? Like, there's plenty of government officials who get elected into office and they're not very good at their job. You're a prime example of that, Trump. But that's not a crime. Being a bad politician is not a crime unless you're like engaging in like, you know, embezzling of funds or, you know, something that's like actually illegal. But it's not a crime to be shit at your job. So dumb.
Newsom, saying that if he was his own border czar, Tom Homan, he would arrest Newsom. He pushed back to a reporter asking, well, what would his crime be? This is obviously not a crime, what he said, but instead he said his primary
Don't forget that next Thursday is Juneteenth. True!
crime was ever running for governor in the first place. So,
Yeah,
so clearly
see?
here this is getting incredibly personal. These are personal jabs. But
Yeah, this is like a petty fight, between the two of them. This is coming right off of the heels of like the crash out between Elon and Trump. So I feel like a lot of like Trump's like angst is coming fresh off the heels of that. He's still got some of that angst in him. Don't worry, Chuck Schumer will save us by sending a strong-worded letter. That'll should be sure to save. True.
also know that there is a lot of emphasis on what's going on, and there are a lot of power behind both of these people. Now, he was asked specifically a question about his past rhetoric when it came to deploying the National Guard, and in particular, how he said in the past that it should be up to the governors. Take a listen.
2020, when you were talking about unrest in American cities, you said, quote, "We have to go by the laws. We can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor." What changed now? Why is this situation different to not consult with Governor Newsom about this?
Well, the biggest change from that statement is we have an incompetent governor. So I talked about governors, but I didn't talk about he's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California.
There's so many instances of that, chat, where you will see like these like insane contradictions where like he made a statement previously that says one thing and now he's saying something completely different. I think the funniest thing that I've noticed in regards to, this is he's referring to a lot of these protesters as insurrectionists. And it's like, my guy, like the people who were in support of you on J6, those were insurrectionists. That's what an insurrection looks like. But you think those are great people. In fact, you think they're such great people that you pardoned a lot of those people. And they engaged in far more unlawful behavior than a lot of these protesters are. But in your eyes, those are good people because they support you. But when they're speaking against you and your bullshit like actions against undocumented immigrants, suddenly, it's an insurrection and they need to be dealt with. Like, come on.
He's destroyed.
And also, again, like, to be clear, there is some, like, legality to a president being able to override their request for the National Guard from the local, government officials, whether it be like the mayor's office or whether it be something like, the governor in this case. There are legal, steps that can be taken where that would be a legal action. But I'm sorry, in this particular situation, this is not one of them. You cannot mobilize the National Guard just because you think someone's doing a bad job as a governor. Like, that's not a thing you can do.
One of our great states.
This is a misuse of the National Guard.
If I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order.
And of course, all of this is stemming from the fact that this is the first time in 60 years that a president has called in the National Guard without the request of the governor. It doesn't seem like this is ending anytime soon. When he was asked,
and again, let me remind you that the last time this was done, all those years ago, it was to protect protesters who were engaging in their legal right to protest. And here, Donald Trump is doing it to attack protesters. It's pretty wild how that works, right?
about a potential lawsuit. He pushed back on that too, saying, well, this is what we had to do. So he is doubling, tripling down on this bringing in the reinforcements without having the support of the state's governor.
So speaking of reinforcements, Natasha, you have some new reporting on U.S. Marines now being mobilized to L.A. What have you learned?
Yeah, this was a day ago. This was a new report that had surfaced towards the end of the day. But yeah, this is known now that, yeah, Marines have been sent out as well.
Yeah, Casey, this is something that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth previewed over the weekend. He said that he would be willing to deploy Marines to Los Angeles to help with the crowd control and help.
Did you see the clip of the DNC chair literally crying because of what the vice chair wanting to primary weak Dems? I haven't seen that. I don't know if you're in my Discord, but feel free to join my Discord. I'll actually do the command for that. Join my Discord, and we have sections in the Discord where you can submit stuff like that. I definitely like to take a look at that.
Deal with the protests there, in addition to the National Guard's troops that were mobilized by President Donald Trump. And it now appears, according to our sources, that those Marines who are based in California, they have been mobilized and they are preparing to head to Los Angeles to help with these protests. Now, it's unclear at this point exactly what their task is going to be. We're told that Defense Department lawyers are still kind of working out the rules of engagement for them and the kind of left and right of what they can actually do once they're there. But we're told that it is largely expected to mirror the kind of standing orders that the National Guard has, which is they can protect federal personnel. If they are threatened, they are going to be protecting property, but ultimately they cannot be engaged in law enforcement type activities like making arrests, for example, unless President Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, which would allow those troops, those National Guard troops, as well as the Marines to start acting in a law enforcement capacity. So this is
And that's a scary thought. You know, that's a thought that, like, you never want to see something like that happen. And the fact that Trump is even toying with the possibility of doing that, these are really scary times we live in, chat. Like, that is a very scary thought to think about. But yes, like, he may not have done it yet, but just the mere fact that he's considering doing that's really fucking scary.
Obviously, a significant escalation in President Trump's use of the military on U.S. domestic soil as a show of force against these protesters. But ultimately, it is not entirely clear.
It's an intimidation tactic. He's trying to intimidate his opposition. And not only that, as I mentioned before, it's a posturing thing, too. He wants to look in front of his supporters like he's swinging his big dick around, like, look at me, I'm getting the job done. When in reality, he's sending these troops out when they're not needed. They're not even doing anything here. They're just standing around doing nothing.
How different their role is going to be, if at all, from those National Guard troops who are already working inside Los Angeles alongside federal personnel to try to get these protests under control, Casey.
This is the first time in 60 years that a president has deployed the National Guard against the wishes of a governor.
Yep.
When it happened then, it was President Lyndon Johnson who was protecting civil rights activists in Alabama. Let's listen to how President...
Again, I know I'm being a broken record here, but that's just really funny to me. The last time this was done was to protect protesters, and now it's being done to attack and intimidate them.
President Trump talked about these protesters.
He's making us look like a joke to other countries. He's making us look so fucking insane that other countries, first of all, tourism to the United States from other countries has dropped substantially. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people around the world are looking at our country right now and being like, those fucking Americans are crazy. We don't want anything to do with that. There's a lot of hate directed at our country right now, as Travis in the chat is saying. And, like, it's so bad, this, like, deportation stuff, because I mentioned this in an earlier segment. Like, one of the people that got wrongfully deported was somebody who was legally here as part of their, like, vacation. They were legally here. They had all the documents they needed to be here as part of their vacation. And they got detained and deported as well. Okay? So, like, it's gotten to the point where other countries are warning their citizens not to travel to America. Or at the very least, if they do, they're giving them, like, suggestions on how to protect themselves while they're here. Like, that's how fucking bad this shit is.
Today.
We are the laughing stock of the world stage right now.
The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators, they're insurrectionists, they're bad people, they should be in jail.
Oh, shut the fuck up, okay? Shut the fuck up. Like, when we had actual insurrectionists storming the Capitol in support of you, you said they were good people, and you pardoned them so they didn't have to actually face, repercussions for their actions. But these people are protesting, which is their American given right to do so. They have a right in this country to do exactly that. And those are insurrectionists that need to be punished by you? What the fuck?
specifically the president's choice of the word insurrectionists.
There was articles saying that the EU Congress people were recommended to bring burner phones when they come to America. Jesus.
Likely no accident. Over the weekend, Trump refused to rule out invoking the Insurrection Act. That act allows him to deploy active duty military troops on the streets of America's cities and towns to conduct law enforcement. This does seem to be a fight that Donald Trump wants. He, of course, views law enforcement, crime, immigration issues as winning issues for him and the Republican Party. And the protests in California have allowed him to target a blue city in a blue state. And of course, the state's Democratic governor likely to run for president in 2028. The question is, of course, just how far will the president go? Let's look at how Gavin Newsom seems to be answering that question right now.
This is serious. The people's lives are at stake. The reputation of this country is at stake. Great American cities and states. It's not just, this is a preview for things to come. This isn't about LA.
Yeah, and we're already starting to see it. Like, obviously, like, things are happening in LA. Like, the majority of, like, the media attention is on LA right now. But we're seeing protests like this happening in Austin, Texas now. Somebody in chat earlier tonight mentioned that there's protests going on in Atlanta now. So, like, this is something that's going to be a very nationwide issue as ICE progresses to other states within the country and starts to engage in these very, terrible acts of, like, mass deportation and, like, not allowing these undocumented immigrants to have the due process that they have the right to have access to. Like, as this continues, we're going to see more protests like this throughout the country. LA was just the start.
Per se, it's about us today. It's about you, everyone watching tomorrow. I promise you. I mean, this guy's unhinged. Donald Trump is unhinged right now.
It's totally true. Totally true. So, I don't know. Last I saw, Gavin Newsom has indeed filed, the filing that he needs to do to sue the Trump administration for the way that they're engaging with this. So it's going to be interesting to see as the days go on, how this story progresses. But yeah, these two are not too happy with each other. And the war of words between the two of them has been interesting to observe for sure.